Hello, so we're going to get started. So thank you all for attending this talk about the common Java security issues and their remediations. So let me first talk a bit about me. So I'm a software engineer at BlackRock. I've been there for a year and a half, and I'm passionate about cybersecurity. So why did I get passionate with cybersecurity? Well, as a child, I always wanted to be something that was great. So I tried to be Superman, but as a human, it's pretty hard to fly. Then I tried to be Spider-Man, but as a human, it's pretty hard to walk on the walls. So I ended up most of my summers with a broken arm, and my parents got quite tired of it. So I decided I had to change my career plan. So I ended up going for that guy, which is Mr. Robot. I wanted to be the white version of Mr. Robot, being able to break into a lot of cybersecurity systems. So today we're going to talk first about the presentation of the dummy application that I developed for this talk, and then we're going to move on to the common Java flows, so starting with SQL injection, then to direct object reference, cross-site scripting, OSCOM injection, XML external entity. Then we'll have a few breaks with the key takeaways, and finally I'll demo some of the IDE security tools that we're using. So let me first show you my dummy application. So this is the application that I developed for the conference. I don't know if you can see well, I hope you do. So this is mainly just a map with a bunch of numbers on it. So if I click on one number, it just displays a little text. Hey mom, for example. And then what can I do? I can log in. I can log in as a user. And then when I'm logging, what can I do? I can just buy a new number. So I want to buy, for example, the number 27. I can put a latitude. I can put the longitude. I can buy my numbers. So number 27, there you go. And then I can see my purchase history. So here is the purchase history with all the invoices that I bought. So I hope you understood that this application doesn't do much. It's just a dummy application, just in order to be able to demo some of the flows. So now let me start with the common Java flows that we're going to review. So the first one I want to talk about is the SQL injection. So it was discovered in the late 1990s, which is a while ago. It's in the OWASP, it's the number 3 in their 2021 rating. So what is OWASP for those who are a little new to cybersecurity? It's mainly a website or a community that's a reference in cybersecurity. And once every few years, they get out this list of the top 10 Java security, the top 10 security issues that you have. So SQL injection is part of the injection family, and it's number 3. So we're going to see it again and again, this number 3, because there's like a lot of different injection. So what is it mainly? It's an injection of malicious SQL code into a web application's input field. So if we go back on my application, well, I know there was a little spoiler earlier, but does anyone know where I could try and input some SQL injection? Anyone? Yeah, in the login. So if I go to the login here, I could try to go for a wrong username, for example, and then try and log in. I can see there's an error. So if I go to my backend, that's here. Are you all able to see? I hope you do. Yeah, so we can see the query. So the query is select ID from user table with my username and my password. What are we going to try and do? We're going to try and break this. We're going to try and go around this because maybe that the security is not good enough and maybe that we could break into it. So what can you see? You can see that the username is actually in the apostrophe. So what if I try and break this apostrophe and I try and do something else with other apostrophe and I log in? I can see that the error message is actually quite different. So here, if I go back here, I can see I get an error in my SQL statement. So what can we try and do? We can try and go for one of the easy ones. So for example, here, if I select ID from user table where username is empty, then what could I say? I could try and go for something that's always true. If I go there and then I say, oh, 1 equal 1, what happens? Oh, I can still see the same error. So if we go here, we can see that we still have a syntax error. Why is it? Because actually there is something else then going, and it's going to make me fail my SQL query. But we have something in SQL that's two dashes, and if I put them, it means that then the rest of the query is just going to be comments. So now if I try to log in, yeah, we're logged in. We're logged in as the first user, which is pretty bad for my application. So now what we're going to try and do, we're going to try and mainly fix this. So let me try to the login function here and look at the code. So this is the code. I hope it's big enough and you can see. So does anyone know how it's possible to fix this code? Sorry? I'm not going to go that far. But what we can do here is to parameterize the query. So as you can see here, I'm directly adding the username inside the query, which is pretty bad. So what we want to do is send the query first and then send the parameters so that when SQL gets it, it's not going to get confused and try to interpret my parameters as part of the query. So here we can just remove all of this and put interrogation mark. And there we can do the same and put just an interrogation mark. Wait, I'm having something more. And here we're going to just add the prepared statement. We're going to set the string. So the first one, as we could see, is the username. And then the second one. So my second one is my password. Then we're going to try and restart this application. Restart the Spring Boot server. Hope it's not too long, because I've seen a lot of people during this conference having time issues. And now if I go log out and I try to log in again, so we can try and log in with the same payload. And now I get this error, because actually the issue is fixed. Means that now it's not going to try and interpret my parameter as part of it. So now let's move on to the next flow that I want to share. So the next flow is the direct object reference. I didn't exactly find where it got invented or who founded it first, but it's been around since a long time. So in the OWASP top 10 list, it's the number 7, and it mainly refers to an exposition of a reference to an internal object without proper authentication checks. So in my application here, well, let me try and log in again. Does anyone know where I could try, for example, to have a direct object reference? Yeah, that's it, in the purchase history. So here, as I showed you earlier, I can see all my invoices. So for example, I can try and go for my invoice number 11. What do I have here? It's extremely small. Let me just... I can see, okay, I didn't go very far with the invoices. This number was bought mainly yesterday by the user 5. I am the user 5. So now, what if I wanted to go for another number? For example, did I buy number 3? I don't think I did. So let me try and go for the number 3. And here, oh, we can see I already did prepare this a bunch of times, but we can see that this number was bought by the user 2. But earlier we saw that I'm actually user 5, meaning that we are having an issue here. There is not enough authentication checks. So this is a very important part also. You should always, no matter what you're doing, try and check the user. You can never believe what is going to send you the front end. So there we go in the invoices. So here in the download invoices, we're going to go here and we're going to add a check access function. So not gonna lie, I already implemented this bit because it was gonna be a little too long. But the idea is to give it the invoice ID that I have a session cookie that's around, and if I can't check my access, so meaning if it's false, I just want to return. I don't want to go any further if I can't verify the access. So now let me try and restart this. And if I restart my Spring Boot server, and now I try to go for invoice number 3, oh, we can see it doesn't work anymore. Let's just verify that the other ones are still working. And yeah, I can see I can still download invoice number 19, for example. Now moving on to cross-site scripting. So cross-site scripting is a very interesting one. So it got discovered also in the early 2000s. It's also part of the injection family as of the new 2021 top 10 list. Before it was like a separate category, but they decided to add it in the injection family. So a cross-site scripting is an injection of malicious code into a website, which then executes on the client side. So what is very important to understand with the cross-site scripting is that there are two different types. So there is the stored one and the reflected one. So mainly the stored one means it's going to affect all of my users or some of my users. It means I'm going to manage to store malicious code in the applications database, which will then be rendered to everyone. For example, imagine you're displaying a chat, and I give some malicious code in the chat, then all the users connecting to this chat are going to see and going to have my malicious code. And then there is the second one, which is the reflected one. So this one is going to be trickier to go onto affecting a lot of people at the same time, but it's still a very important one. It's going to be more about injecting directly in the fields. So for example, if you have some URL parameters, you're going to put their malicious code, and there you're going to send a link to a user that will then click on the link and get hacked. So the big difference that we can notice with cross-site scripting compared to the other ones is that it needs another user interaction, whereas the other one, you can just, for example, SQL Injection, you can on your own get all the database and steal it. Cross-site scripting, you're going to need another user to do something. So let me go back to this application. In this application, can anyone tell me where I could try and go for cross-site scripting? Yeah, in the buy number. So as we saw, the buy number is the number I buy, and then I just display it to absolutely everyone. So here, well, let me try and put other latitude. Then it's going to be fun. We have to find it on the map. I don't know latitude and longitude that well. So one of the common one that I could go for is the script alert script. So let me zoom in. So this is one of the most common payloads for XSS. Let me try and see if it works. So we're looking for number 28. I don't know where the number 28 got. Oh, it got here. So if I click there, I can't see my payload, but I can't see anything. So we can try and go on the inspect button and try and see if we can have any more information. So here, if I click on the marker here, so I can see the pop-up, and here I can see the script actually. So the payload that I put it is actually being displayed in the website. It's just that somehow it's not being executed. But it's still very important to notice that as it's not being displayed as text, means it's not considered to be text, which is a very big one. So now if we go back to the by number function, here we can try some other payloads. There are some other very common payloads that we can have. For example, with the iframe, I can have iframe, and then I can have the source, which is going to be an alert. So it's going to be JavaScript. So let's see if this one's going to get interpreted. So if I click on number 29, I can see it gets interpreted, which is pretty bad for my application. But now it doesn't seem that important. Wait, okay, well, everyone's going to get a pop-up. It's not that important, you're going to say. But what if we could go way further, actually? Because here, okay, I'm just displaying a pop-up, but I can also try and display the cookies, for example. So now if I click here, I can see, well, let me zoom. Okay, I can't zoom on the pop-up, I hope you can see. But it mainly displays the session cookie. So I'm not going to go any further in this exploit, but what you can see and know is that if I'm able to display it, then it means I'm also able to steal it. I could just write more JavaScript code, and then I could just send it to myself. I could send it to someone else. And then it means that as all my users are being affected at the same time, anyone clicking on this 30 button would then be having their cookie stolen. So if we go back in the code now, how can we fix this? Does anyone know how we could just avoid this terrible thing to happen? Do we have any ideas? No? Okay, let me just give the solution. So what we can do here is actually we can sanitize our input. So we can use JSoup, for example, so which is going to sanitize the input mainly. So I'm going to give it the whitelist then. And then the idea is that JSON is just going to sanitize my input before I send it to the server. So let me now restart. As we can see below, there was like some errors that happened because it wasn't really happy with me sending a lot of scripts. So now if I get back to the application here and I want to buy the number, let me try and buy exactly the same one to see what happens. And I can see when I click on 31, nothing happens, meaning that it's not anymore able to input malicious code and execute. So now if we move on to the next one, so now we're going to have a look at the OS common injection. So I didn't really find when it got invented, but it gained a lot of interest in the early 2000s. It's also part of the injection family, so still number 3 in the OWASP top 10 list. And what is OS common injection? It's going to be mainly about executing arbitrary command on a vulnerable system. So in my vulnerable system here, I may give this one out because it's a pretty tricky one. So I kind of had to make that one up to show you, but I'm not sure if it happens like this in real life. But in the purchase history here, I can filter. So I can look for the ones having a 2. I can look for the ones having a 1. Or I can look for, I don't know, the ones having a 3. But oh yeah, we do have some now. So if I go to my back end here, I can see some logs. So let me show you the logs. It's the OS commands that are going to be run. And I can see that I'm doing grep, so meaning that I'm going to mainly go in my back end, and then I'm going to try and grab the files that are containing the payload that I'm giving. So what is really bad here is that we're not sanitizing anything, and we are just sending it to it. So for example, we could literally try and delete one of the files. So if I go for number 3, and then I can try to remove my file. And I can see nothing happens. Oh, we could think it's all fine. But if I go there, and now I can see the number 30 is not here anymore, means I was able from just a search toolbar to remove files directly from my server. And let me tell you, there are a lot of other ways to take advantage of this. And you can remove file, but you can also add file, you can also execute file, and it's extremely dangerous. So let me look at my code, and why could it go so wrong? So it's again going to be in the invoices. And here, I want to get the invoices in the database. So I'm going to do a process builder and give it some comments. So first, let me tell you about how rubbish this code is. It should never, ever be like this. It's kind of meant to be already secure because you give it the commands, and it's only going to execute the first command and all the other ones are parameters. So giving it /bin/sh just means you're completely getting this wrong, because you should just give it one command and then the rest is parameters. But anyway, here the main thing to do is just don't do it. It's just you should never have a process builder that's going to execute commands. It's always a bad idea, and there's always workarounds. So for this one, I wrote the workaround. I'm not going to go between everything because it's a little long, but for this one, for example, I'm listing some files in a directory, and I can just use this function that's actually doing it. It's a directory that lists files, which is pretty evident, pretty common, and we can just directly use it. So just going to show you about how easy it is to go over this one. Just going to comment my very rubbish code that I'm kind of ashamed to show. And then if we refresh now with the code, so you can see it's the same amount of lines. It's just that now I'm using built-in functions for what I specifically want to do, and I'm not trying to just have things run in my process builder. So now if I try the same, we can try and remove number 17, for example. And here we can see we don't have anything, and I can see number 17 is still here. So we're getting more safe. So now moving on to the last one we're going to see today, it's XML external entity. So this one's also discovered in the early 2000s. It's the number 5 on the OWASP top 10 list. So it doesn't have a category on its own. It's mainly in the security misconfiguration category. So what is it about? It's about an application that is going to process XML data that contains a reference to an external entity. So for here, in this case, I'm going to give you also that one because it's not the easier to find. So it's going to be again in the login. I found that it was fun to finish where we started. So here, if I log in and I go to the network, I can see my request here. Oh, we can't see it. Let me get more space around. So here I can see that my request is actually an XML. So when you see this and you're doing a pen test, it's always interesting because it's the first thing you're going to test. Did they think about disabling external entity? So here, there is this great functionality in Firefox that you can resend the same comment. So here we have the form data and we have the username. So if I send this, I can see my response. I get the user ID. I'm authenticated. I'm happy. But what now we're going to look for the XXC payload because it's a very common one. OK, so this link, we should maybe get it. And I'm going to go get the XXC payload here. So, oh wait, this one doesn't go for any file, which is a little sad. So here, I hope you can see well. Let me try and zoom there. So you have the doc type, so that is going to go, and mainly it's going to go and try and access a file in your directory. So we have the username, the first name, last name, and then it's going to try and display it. So if I send this one, I get an error, of course, first, because this file absolutely doesn't exist. But I created one for this, so we're going to do in the user, in the shared, and the devox. Now let me try. I get an error again. Oh, it's mainly because I don't have the good fields anymore. I was supposed to have a username here, and I was also supposed to have a password, which I should still get. And now if I send this, I can see I have an error for the username John. So I just need to give this. So the entity here that we are returning, we're going to give it to the username and send it. Oh, and now we can see that this should be displayed at DevOps. If X6 is successful, means it was successful. So we were able to access a file that was directly on my directory, and it was in my personal file. So this should absolutely never happen. So now let me go back in the code and see how we could fix this. So in the login here, this is how I process it. Well, first, let me tell you, it's weird to get XML payloads, but I made it for the conference. Does anyone know how we could fix this? Any ideas in the room? Yeah, mainly it's just a configuration. It's a misconfiguration. So as I don't know by heart everything, we can go here and we're going to go on the OWASP cheat sheet for the XXE. Yeah, so XML external entity prevention. They have absolutely everything you need. Let me go here, see what is my builder. It's a SAGS builder. Okay, gonna go here, gonna look for my SAGS builder. It's here. I see a few flags there. I should definitely add those flags, which they look really cool. And now that I added my files, I can just try and restart. So it literally took me 3 lines and maybe 2 minutes. And now that I restarted it, we can try and launch this one again and see if it goes through. And now it doesn't. Now it's just not going to resolve external entities anymore, meaning I'm safe. And it took me 3 lines. So now moving on to the summary. So we just saw the SQL injection. So what is the solution for SQL injection? It's to parameterize queries. Then there is direct object reference, which you need to check credentials, cross-site scripting, where you need to sanitize inputs, OS common injection. The main reason is just don't use it, because it's mainly always a bad idea. If you really have to, for some reasons that you can explain, you need to sanitize inputs. And then finally, so XML external entity, you just need to disable the external entities. What I wanted to show here that I found quite interesting is that all those issues are actually really old, as you can see. They are all from 2000 or from 1990, and it's still some things that we see every day in the pen test. Every time we test an application, every time we review code, we still see them, which is crazy, because they've been around for so long. But anyway, moving on, I'm just going to show a few IDE security tools. So these are the companies having one. There are way more companies having one, but there is like the Sneak one, Contrast, Solene, and I'm going to demo the Veracode one that we are using sometimes. So it's the Veracode green light scan. So here, well, it's a little sad because now I fixed all the issues, but let's see if it still finds something. So I just have a Veracode green light scan. I'm going to try and scan my file. I think it may need internet, so it may be a bit slow. Oh, you're already there. So here we can see that it still was able to find some of the flows. So here, for example, it found an XSS on the line 91, so in the invoices file. If we go to the line 91, here it's unhappy because it's saying that I'm returning so to my front end some bytes, and he can't see any parametrization. So here I can see I could definitely do better. So let me finish by thanking BlackRock, which was very supportive in helping me to organize this talk, and to all the teams that helped me rehearse and helped me correct so I could do good today. I also wanted to thank ChatGPT, who wrote, I think, at least 80% of the app on his own. But yeah, we did a great pair up. Any questions? So if we don't have any questions, good, we can go eat earlier.